What's up? Wednesday night, 12-volt talk.
I'm gonna keep
up in
doing
the
something weird.
house.
I'm keep doing the finger guns. If you guys have suggestions in the chat, please let me know. Or if you're listening to audio, I'm trying out new intros. I'm not
Shooter
digging the finger
McVega.
guns. Yeah, I need something else. So need suggestions, please.
We're tired of the yo.
Right.
I kind of like that. It's like hello in the 90s.
In Hi-Fi Vega.
I guess.
It's like I watch way too much Yo MTV raps. I'm so sorry for that.
Yeah. Well, like we talked about before, that was back in the day where you didn't have control over what video came on. You just had to watch it in hopes that the next one will be a good one.
Yeah.
These days it's like you go on YouTube, check whatever you want and get it and all that good stuff. So yeah, it is Wednesday and we're in what? This is May the 12th, 2021.
Yes,
this is episode 106. And we already got Chrissy C hitting us up.
Back in the house. Finger guns. Love the finger guns. What up?
There you go. Thank you so much. So, yeah, Rob and I have talked a lot about this online. I know Kip's brought it up several times during the Kicker Unmasked live events about, this whole kicker test that they do with the amps. And I know to them it's kind of funny because they're like, look, this is just how we do it. And we're like, what? I know at least I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So we talked to Kip about it and said, look, we're interested in seeing or learning more about your test because, I've tested amps and had them blow up. And that sound that the KXA 2400 was making, it was making me cringe a little bit because I know that's like usually the sound I hear right before it goes pow.
Yeah, and you've showed it in video. Yeah, you got the quick gun, the ninja reflexes to cut it off.
Ninja reflexes to shut it off, or pop the fuse, which scares me every time. Doesn't matter if I'm prepared or not; it scares me. But I mean. So just to provide a little background for those who did not see what Kicker did a few weeks ago, they were doing a test talking about wire, CCA wire versus OFC. And they hooked up the KXA 2400, which is a 2400 watt amp, and they ran a 4-gauge OFC.
CCA.
Yeah, CCA and OFC.
Yeah.
But in both of the tests, pretty much cranked it up and let it go for like 3 minutes at full tilt boogie is what Kip calls it.
Which is another Kipism. Put it down to the he might have stole that from the last Arkansas Razorback football coach because he said that a lot.
Well, that's
he was terrible, but he's gone now. So Kip, I hope it doesn't end up the same way for you, my friend.
he's still got his get out of jail free card. He tells us.
Yeah.
But anyway, they were doing this test and, showing the heat of the wire and showing that the CCA wire gave you less power and more heat and all that stuff. And as he's talking about heat and wire and everything, I'm just sitting here with my mouth like dropped wide open saying, that amp is going for minutes at full volume and I don't see any smoke. And I'm like...
I was concerned. I did state my concern. I was like, Kip, did you test this earlier like this? And he said he did. And I was like, okay, I trust you, Kip. I don't want this to go bad because we know it can go bad very quickly.
So when we brought it up, in the chat, and I know we chatted it when Kip finished because he was moving like from his test room back to the main part of the studio. And we're like, wow, you just like ran that amp full throttle there for like 3 minutes. And he's like, oh yeah, then, we do 8 or 9 minutes is what our standard is. And I'm like, so then it made me think, what is the standard that other people are using? What do people use? A lot of times, you use a dyno, you hit the power and that's pretty much it, right? You don't keep it running for minutes. I mean, sometimes maybe 10 or 15 seconds, but
and that's not listed in the CTA standards as far as I can tell, right? I didn't see that when I looked them up.
I don't know. Well, let's drop Mr. Kip in, find out from the source. We're gonna bring you in, Kip. You ready?
I think I'm ready. How you guys doing tonight?
Hey, Kip.
Hey,
Thanks for
good.
joining us, man. We brought this up many times since you've shown off your tests, and I know you're probably like, "What is so exciting about this? We do this all the time." But that's kind of what happens though when you get used to doing something that other people it's amazing to, right? So this is something I think is something that needs to be, has a lot more light shined on it, because the fact that I don't know how many other people do this, and maybe it's more than I think, but I don't think so.
Well, I don't want to speak about any brands tonight. I know there may be people that come up in the comment section and don't want to talk about a brand or something. You might make me talk about a particular category of amplifiers, but I'm not going to talk about any particular manufacturer of amplifiers, because I don't want to get into that. We're Kicker. It's not who we are. Obviously, we have a certain confidence level in testing our products. And when we did that wire test, and I was honest, I mean, Robert did ask me, and I was on it. I mean, when we went into the test, we tested it this afternoon, or the afternoon of that show, to make sure everything had worked. But we all knew that this is a hard test. And I wanted to preface on the show, and we did, to let everyone know that this is going to be the hardest test any amplifier can do. I mean, it's a 50 hertz sine wave, and we're going to take it to full output power, and we're going to use this so we can draw the current and voltage we want through the wire. Because what we were concerned about was the wire test. We weren't thinking about the amplifier, which I guess kind of goes to the confidence level we have in our own products, is we knew the amplifier would hold up for that length of time. We just know because of the testing we put our amplifiers through. If it wouldn't hold up for that length of time, the thermal rollback would have kicked in, or the thermal turn on or turn off would have kicked in, and the amplifier would have not sustained any damage. But even that said, things happen. Everything in here runs on magic. It's some people call it FM, for freaking magic. It all works by magic. And if we were going to let the magic smoke out, I did preface and let everybody know, hey, there's a chance that on tonight's show you're going to see us smoke an amplifier. And if we do, no big deal. We got a spare. We're going to pull it out, and we'll just keep on going down the test, because we're kind of blessed to have the electronic repair department just in the back. We can just walk back there and say, could we please have these repaired, kind sir? We'd like to have them fixed and do the same thing again. And so for us, it wasn't that big a deal to go through that test, but we're also realistic about it, and we preface it with, it is possible. This is an extremely hard test on an amplifier. But like you said, and I never thought about it, Derek, it really opened my eyes when you started talking in the chat feed, and I caught those few comments you made. We were all about testing wire and showing the differences between CCA and copper, and what power you will or won't make, and the amount of heat the wire creates. We weren't even focused on the amplifier. Did we think one could go up in smoke? It's possible, but we were real confident that we weren't really, there was no clock. It wasn't like I was watching a timer to see how long the amplifier was on. I just turned it up, was watching the amp dynometer, and just like you, I too heard the output transformers. They were singing.
Yeah, they sing, and you can just feel the stress of the amplifier at that certain point, right? And that's usually the part where I start cringing. And as you were doing it, and it kept going, and it was still making that little tick, 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 tick sound, I'm like, oh, it's going to blow, it's going to blow. Kept right on going. So we brought it up to you afterwards, and we're like, look, that's impressive. And you're like, oh, yeah, we run ours for a certain number of minutes at full, as you call it, full tilt boogie. But I was curious, and I know you've talked with some of your testing guys, and Rob and I have been there, and we've, sat down with Ethan, and the way he goes over the tests they do with the APs and all that. But like the torture test that you talked about, is this something that like all of the testing goes through of an amplifier before it's approved? You have to go a certain number of minutes at full volume. That's just part of your test standards. Is that right?
It is. I mean, a lot of people, out there in the world, and I've been around long enough that I've heard just every 40 hertz and other joke you can make about brands, whether it's us or other brands. And, in the years past, I've heard people use the term manufacturer. They've said Kicker is a manufacturer. And it's the farthest from the truth. And that's why I'm glad when I get people like Dean coming through and doing the video he did, which everyone calls a movie, and then you guys coming for a visit. We really like to drive it home that when you leave here, if you walk away with anything, at least you walk away with going, hey, Kicker truly designs all this stuff in-house. Do they have to manufacture globally? Yeah, I mean, I would love for us to say we could build everything here in the United States of America. We just can't. There are certain parts for a subwoofer that you can't buy here in the United States of America. They're just not made here. And so we have to source everything. Best way I can put it is if you've ever looked at the side of like a shop vac, they got a nice big proud sticker on there. It says, designed and engineered in America, assembled with foreign and domestic parts. And, we just have to be honest about it. There is no all made in the USA on most electronics, cell phones, tablets, computers, gear that we make. And so we do want to drive home the point that even though we do offshore manufacturing, these are people that we have partnered up with, and they are being hired to build our design. This is our amplifier design. All these people are hired for is they're hired to assemble it to our standards per our schematics using the parts that we specify. It has to pass the tests that we certify and then put it in a box, and then we buy obviously thousands upon thousands of these to resell, and we market and promote, sell, warranty. I mean, that's one of the key things that I think a lot of upstart companies don't realize. They think, it's just easy. I'll just go buy a container worth of product, bring it in, and I'm a brand. And then they quickly realize that there's this thing called profit that you have to make. It's not a dirty word, but if you're going to provide customer service and warranty and all the things that a dealer and a consumer wants after the sale, it's more than just putting your name on a box and throwing it out the door. So I like people to know that if they at least leave the plant after they get the experience here, is that, wow, these guys truly design everything here. And like every other brand that you can pull out of a hat, they're all using offshore manufacturing or offshore sourcing for parts because they have to.
Oh, so you didn't go on to the tattoo wall and be like, give me that, and that, and that, and that, and then be like, yeah, it's kicker.
You know what? That's one of my favorite jokes. It's funny you bring that up, Robert, is, if you got a lot of money and that's what you want to do, I mean, you could walk into a shop and you could say, man, I love that basket. That color cone looks awesome. Let's take that motor. By the way, here's a thumb drive with my cool logo on it. This is my brand. And they just pick the parts off a wall and put it together, and they call it a subwoofer. And the funny thing about that is, and this is my running joke, is you could put me in the kitchen, take my wife and have her go sit in the living room, put me in the kitchen and have all the ingredients sitting in front of me to make a cake. And I could probably make a cake. When it comes out of the oven, it might feel like a cake, but I can guarantee it's not going to taste like a very good cake. And just because you've got the right ingredients in front of you doesn't mean you know how to mix them to get a good end result. And that's how I like to put that, is that, parts are not just parts. I've been here at this brand for 25 years. I have a relationship with Kicker that goes back well beyond that, between my rep days and my retail days. I mean, I've known Kicker for 33 years as far as a brand, and other high-end brands that you guys talk about on old school stereo and stuff. I mean, I used to sell Rockford Fosgate back in the day. I sold PPI when it was really PPI back in the day. I sold Soundstream when it was really Soundstream back in the day. I'm blessed that I grew up in that early 80s through the 90s. I was in that whole retail scene then and got to experience a lot of these brands. And Kicker, and Rockford Fosgate, quite honestly, are probably the only two brands that people know as, like the American brands, the Rough and Rugged, the Big Bass. We're the only ones really left. All the other names that people know, they're just names today. Zapco is a prime example. Like Zapco today, it's not owned by Robert Zeff. Robert Zeff sold Zapco. It's just a name on a piece of Chinese electronics, and they're not very good. As I know Big D has tested some of those amplifiers with the name on it. And I'm not trying to disparage anything. I just want people to have a realistic view of, a big name from back in the 80s and 90s may not be the same name today. And so I'm really proud that, we can say, yes, we design everything here in-house. It does have a standard from Kicker that we have to meet. And I actually talked to the head engineer today, Joe Hobart, and he and I spoke a little bit, and he gave me some paperwork so that I don't have to remember everything. But we do have what we call kind of like pillars, that all of our electronics amplifiers have to pass through these pillars, or it can't have the Kicker name on it. And I'll gladly go through those whenever you want to ask, whatever, but it's a great thing on that. But as far as the testing, since you brought that up, I want to kind of address that real quick as far as the first one. In the Wayback Machine, we did used to do really long thermal run tests. And what we found is that, you get an amplifier, and it was like 7 or 8 minutes. But the thing was that for real world application, a customer playing music in their car long term, the 78-minute full output test can kind of show us the immediate weak spots. Is there enough mass on the heat sink to absorb the heat? Because that's one of the first things is mass. And when it comes to an amplifier, it's mass and radiation. Everything in there creates heat. You got to be able to absorb that heat away from the parts to keep them cool, because that's how they're going to live. And then you got to radiate that heat away. And in that first little bit of time there, what's important is mass. So you have to be able to suck that heat out as quick as you can, and that's through mass. But once mass reaches ambient temperature, the only way you keep sucking heat out is it's got to radiate that heat away. So we actually modified the testing we do, and it's really cool because I know both of you saw this when you were here. that station in the back that had the car batteries with the alternators driven by electric motors that we can put on. What we do now is all of our amplifiers, every single one, has to pass a minimum of 60 seconds full tilt boogie. I can't say that I coined the phrase, but it's one of my favorites. But at full tilt boogie, an amplifier has to run for 60 seconds, not go into thermal protection, not go into any kind of rollback, not do anything. It has to survive that 60-second test. And our engineers claim that that 60-second test really kind of mimics a quick acceleration as far as power through the amplifier, and can the mass or the density of what's there soak that heat up and keep that amplifier alive, and then can it radiate enough that heat away to keep going. So the 60-second test, it doesn't matter what amplifier we have, they have to pass that 60-second full tilt 50 hertz output. But then, and I'm proud of this, and this kind of ties into, a lot of people may or may not know, but the industry average in 12 volt, if you take 12 volt as an industry, the average in our industry for defectives runs somewhere between 12 and 15%. That's a really big number. Now that's 12 volt as an industry. So that's amps, that's coax speakers, that's subwoofers, that's radios. As an industry, we're 12 to 15%. Here at Kicker, our average runs about 1.75 across the board. So if you take our entire portfolio of products we make, our defective rate runs about 1.75. And as you know, especially with subwoofers and speakers, they're not necessarily defectives. They're just speakers that have been used, abused, run in situations they can't, but it's still considered a warranty. It's just not at that point, it's not a manufacturing defect, it's just an abusive situation. So we're real proud of that. And our amplifiers have to fall underneath that same criteria. So what the engineers came up with a few years back, and you saw that testing station, is after they pass that 60-second, full tilt boogie run, and they go, okay, good, passes this test, we're good on that. We go back there, and this is something that I wasn't even aware of, so it was really cool I went and talked to Joe about it. Is I knew we had that test station, but I wasn't aware of the parameters. And what they do is they'll take an amplifier and put it back there on that test rig, and they can do multiples at a time, as you saw. And that amplifier has to run for no less than 45 minutes, and it has to be at 45 minutes, and this is on music, not sine wave, so this is heavy bass music that we're playing into these, and we basically take the amplifier up to full output power, and then they increase either the drive or the gain, whichever they need to do to get there, but we do 10 dB of overlap. So the amplifier is taken up to clipping, and then 10 dB beyond that. So depending on the amplifier, and all amplifiers are different, depending on how gracefully they run out of steam and they start clipping and raising distortion, you're talking that amplifier is running anywhere from a 10 to, it could be as high as 40% distortion. Just depends on the output curve, as whether what the distortion is, but they're all run at 10 dB overlap, and they have to run that test for 24 hours. So an amplifier has to be on music for 24 hours, 10 dB overlap, and it can thermal, which it will, but it has to, when it's cold, that amp has to run for 45 minutes before it reaches the first thermal time. If that amplifier design will not run for 45 minutes at 10 dB overlap, then that is called a bad design, and we go back to the drawing board. Now, once it reaches that 45 minutes, what will happen in most all cases is it's going to go into thermal protect, and the amplifier is going to shut off. When it shuts off, the amplifier naturally cools down, and after it cools down, it turns itself back on. So that amplifier is sitting back there underneath, so we call it the torture test. It sits there for 24 hours. It has to run at least 45 minutes from cold, and then it has to keep turning itself on and off, and it may run for another 15 and then go into thermal again, or it might run for 20 and go into thermal again, but it has to run for 24 hours and not fail, or that design is considered bad.
That's crazy. That's incredible. What I wanted to do, and thanks for going into that detail, Kip, but if you're okay with it, I've got the segment that you guys did. I've already got it queued up for right when you crank the amp up. So I wanted to kind of show people that didn't see that. Want to share it with everybody, and I've got the audio and everything here. So we'll add it into the stream, and hopefully you guys can hear this. I'm going to go ahead and start it up. If I can get my mouse over to the screen. There we go.
Let it come on. There's the light. That tells me I've got signal. We're good to go. And I'm going to rely on my boy Timmy here, and I can see he's got a good picture on that. So I'm going to bring the amplifier up to clipping. So I'm just going to bring the gain up.
And I think this is the OFC version.
I'm going to pour the gravy on hard. So I'm going to keep going here. I'm going to take it just a little bit. I'm at 1%. I'm going to take it a little bit higher than 1%. should be right about 1%. So right there, you can see, I don't want to get in the way of the scope, but you can see we're putting in at about 2385 to 2442. It's fluctuating in between the high 2300s to mid 2400s, and we are into a 2 ohm load. That's what you can see on that SMD amp dyno. And the voltage over here, you can see we're at 13.15, it's fluctuating just about 13.1 to 13.15 voltage. And we are starting with right about 14 coming out of the power supply. So through that 40-foot run, because it's power and ground, you can see we're getting about a volt drop, but our amplifier is still producing well over 2,400 watts. It's definitely making rated power. And the wire itself, it's getting warm, but it's not. Now understand, this is a stress test for 4-gauge on this big of an amplifier. This is absolutely a stress test.
And this is a
right
very, the amp's very efficient.
Ahead.
I know this amp's very efficient, but I'm sure you're still pulling over 200 amps here.
Oh, yeah, easily. The wire right now, I'm reading on the positive wire with my meter, I'm up to 95.5 degrees. It's fluctuating between 94 and 95. There's a 96, 97. There's 99. It's now getting up to 103. Let me touch it. Yeah, the wire is getting warm. And I'd expect the wire to get warm because I am pulling way more current over this 4-gauge wire than is recommended. I mean, we are way beyond spec as far as what we should be doing here. But what I wanted to show is the amplifier staying on. We've been running it. It's still putting out 2,500 watts. It's at 2,500 watts now, 2476, 2,500. The voltage is dropping, so now you're seeing our semi-regulated power supply kick in, and it's maintaining power. And we're seeing 12.68 volts now coming from the bank over there. And that is because we are starting to heat this wire up, and we're starting to see some loss through the wire. Right now, I'm up to 116, 117, 118. Take another reading up here. There's 119. So the wire is getting warm. I mean, it's definitely warm to the touch, but 4-gauge is running this kicker amplifier to full 2,500 watt output. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn the gain back down.
Yeah. Let her Kip.
Jeez. We lost your audio, Kip. I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I reached over my hip and hit that. So, watching that little short clip, yeah, and watching that short clip maybe even makes me appreciate and understand why I have had the nickname here at Kicker for just about forever. I'm Clip. So.
Yeah, it would have been neat to see the only thing we were missing is a clamp meter to see how much current you're pulling. But I think Rob is right. You're pulling at least 200 amps.
I'm sure it was closer to 300. It had to be.
Yeah, it was a lot. I mean, yeah. And
we'll add a clamp meter to the next. Oop, I shouldn't say that.
Well, you did say you were going to do part 2, so we expect it.
We got a part 2 planned. Ernie and I are actually experimenting around today, trying to get everything set up to make sure it was going to show what we want to do, because we do want to stress test some 1-aught, kind of do that same testing we did, but do it on a 1-aught. And I think we're going to go back and do the 4-gauge again, because there's always that guy. I remember in the feed, someone said, "Oh, I look under the bench. I saw it. They got a cheater amp. There's an amp under there. That's not the real amp that's playing." Guys, we got nothing to gain by cheating on this. It's just we're just showing information. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up, and it'll probably be next Tuesday. At least we hope so. Cross our fingers. If not, we'll move it to another show. But we're going to set up 2 cameras, and we're going to have one camera that actually captures Tim, the camera guy, and me in the room. And no matter what we do, you can see the whole room. There's not going to be any way that we could hide something. Not that we are, because we've got nothing to gain by that. I think when he said he saw something under the bench, he probably saw the load resistors, because those are hanging right there on the bench, and they got those finned aluminum heat sinks. He probably saw that. I don't know. It's just we want to remove any shadow of a doubt, and so anytime someone comes back with that, we're just going to find a way to just move that chess piece across the board and go, okay, we are being as transparent as we know how to be, and if you think we're not, we'll figure out a way to be even more transparent.
Yeah, see, Kicker's cool about that. I would just been like, comment, shut up. and then
move on.
Man, when we show stuff like this, I think it's important. At the end of the day, every brand, and we're a brand, we have to sell products. We got to move products to the stream. We need to solve people's problems. We need to give them great audio. We need to get help with their lifestyle. We need to do that. If we're not selling products, then of course we don't exist as a brand anymore. So to say that we're not always selling, that would be kind of misleading. We are always, but on Unmasked Live, what we're doing is we're not there to hard sell a product. We're there to talk about technology. We're there to talk about what maybe cool features are in the product. And if it's something from Kicker that you think will fit the bill, great, man. We're glad to be here and help you out. And if you like another brand or want to go something else, as long as you're armed with the facts, you'll make a good buying decision. That's what we feel. Yeah, those load resistors, Matt, they were hot.
Yes.
So
I've burnt
They were
myself several
smoking.
times. I built a wood.
Well,
I've got it sitting here. Just for the small ones. I don't have them all bolted down, but for the small ones, I have them clamped here to wood. And let me tell you, you could smell empty. Matter of fact, let me just show
back.
you.
the wood's on fire.
Oh, yeah.
Look at
Oh,
that.
yeah.
You can see where every single one of them was.
Fire! So, maybe what we'll do is we were really just focused on the wire. We do have a clamp amp meter coming as a test tool. We're going to use that on the next testing so we can kind of talk about what you addressed there, Robert, was, ampacity, how much amperage we're running through the wire. And then, obviously having that infrared thermometer, we need to take a look at not only the temperature of the load resistor, but the temperature of the amp. We can show all that. We're not here to hide anything. The whole purpose to that whole show was to get people to understand where the materials that make wire are in the scale of good, better, or best, and just make sure you understand what you're buying, because the thing that bothers me a lot is there's a lot of people that say, CCA is the best. I mean, there's nothing better than CCA. I mean, it's just, and I just have to look at those people and go, really? You don't understand the science of wire, much less the materials that make up a wire, if you think that CCA is not inferior to true copper. And that's what we wanted to show. Now, if you're doing a low-powered system and you can get by running 4-gauge CCA, where you might be able to get by with running maybe 8-gauge copper, and you're happy with that, man, that's cool. Do whatever you want to do. But understand, the key to it is this. You have to use about 2 to 2.5 times the cross-sectional area or mass of aluminum to be able to safely flow the same amount of current as you would in copper. It's just that simple. And so, no, CCA or aluminum wire is not as good as copper. And if someone has told you that or convinced you of that, the only thing that is getting the benefit is your wallet. You might be saving a few bucks, but in the long run, you're not getting any benefit out of it. And I can't tell you how many stories I get from the guys back in electronic repair, or even the techs upstairs, where guys will come in and they'll call and it's an amp problem. My amp's shutting off, but it only does it at night when my headlights are on and stuff like that. Or I've burned up my amp and I've sent it into repair and I've got it back and now it burned up again, and so I've sent it in again. And the guys in the back, they'll actually call and talk to the customer and go, okay, so this is the second time we got this amp back. Tell me a little bit more about your system. And that they'll come to find out it's either undersized wire or it's CCA. And I know one guy particularly, Bill Pendleton worked with, he says, Guy, you've got to get 4-gauge copper wire in this amp. You put 4-gauge copper wire in this amp, your problem's going to go away. And so he did. He went back to the Kicker dealer. We repaired the amp, sent it to the Kicker dealer. He pulled out the CCA wire and upgraded to copper, and then he reached back out to it and says, I can't believe it. It sounds better. It's not shutting off. It's not blowing up like it was. And the best analogy I can use for that is if you were to tape your nose shut and then tape a straw into your mouth, a really small diameter straw, and the only way you could get air in your body was through that straw. And then if you're walking around, man, you're fine. You could probably breathe through that straw all day long and be fine. But if you start taking off at full dead heat running and your body needs oxygen, you're going to come to a point where you're going to drop down and pass out because you're not getting enough oxygen through that small straw to keep your body running. Amplifiers are absolutely the same thing. If you starve them of current or voltage, you're going to get poor performance or you're going to break them.
It's kind of like when you go to a restaurant and you say, yeah, I'll take a Coke, and they say, is Pepsi okay? It's like, no, Pepsi's not okay.
No.
Just give me a water.
Yeah, I don't know that, Chrissy, I don't know that Kicker would do that. They don't like to compare brands. I respect them for that. Yeah. But somebody like me who's an independent, I can do that. So yeah. there could be some of that in the future.
And honestly, to answer Chrissy's question there and to answer you, Derek, honestly, if there was any of that testing you want to do on your channel and you have a particular Kicker amplifier you want to do that with, from my standpoint, you just have to ask. You are one of the test reviewers, along with Robert, obviously, but I have no qualms having you test any of our products. And as you know, because we've worked with you on some other things in the past, there's no stipulations. We don't get to approve the videos. It's nothing like that. I trust the review, and I trust our product, and it's just that simple.
And that says a lot because, obviously people tend to think that, when I do accept things that, that sways in a decision. And my whole thought of it is, I'm not going to make enough on this video just through views to make a difference. Whether, I get the amp for free or I buy it. It doesn't really matter to me. So that doesn't sway in decision. It's more important to me, kind of like the Project Farm guy, to be independent and be showing the real way versus, worrying about who's going to pay me next to do this. And it just doesn't make sense. That's why I've never really gone that route. But, this test alone, and going back to the test that we showed in the 3-minute clip, it really got me thinking, about the way that the amp dyno runs work and all that, and the way people are comparing amps. Again, comparing things based on power alone is, not the best way to do that. But it's just my whole reason for doing what I'm doing is because I was seeing a lot of what I would say false claims. I would say, misleading the customer. A lot of things that really kind of, I wanted to have a device that I could say, this is a brainless device. You can't really mess the test up. People can't blame my test equipment. I'm just going to use something and show them what amplifiers do. Well, the more you do, the more people are getting smart. The manufacturers are understanding that, hey, people are probably going to use amp dynos, or going to use APs, or going to use whatever to show what the true power is. So this forces us to be better with our ratings. And that's truly the whole thing I was trying to do with my channel, is trying to get people to understand that, hey, power is not the only thing about the amp, but if they're saying it's 4,000 watts and it's really 1,000, you can't compare the 4,000 watt to a true 4,000 watt amp and say, wow, I'm saving, a fourth of the money because I got this deal. Go ahead.
And I want to address this one head on because I find it hilarious, and it actually started a conversation back here that I started with R&D. And if I remember correctly, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but the video is like almost 2 million views, and it's the Power Sports 200 watt monoblock.
Yep.
And that amplifier right there, I'm proud to say, is the only kicker amplifier that we know won't make rated power.
I can tell you, Kip, how many different ways I tested that when I got it to say, what am I doing wrong? Then I got some feedback saying, well, it's your power supply oscillating causing the problems. I hooked it straight up to batteries, 14 volts. I did all the tests I could. And I'm like, I'm just coming up a little shy. And then that's before you and I were talking, because you reached out to me after that. And I thought it was interesting because I was saying, this is not right. I've never known a kicker product to not meet its rated power. And that one really concerned me, that it was either something I wasn't noticing or it had to have been a fluke. And then, of course, you came back and said, well, I talked to the tech guys and it does its rated power at the circuit board, but they're not accounting for the wires. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I didn't, jump onto the rails of the amp to do the test. I actually used the speaker wires, but I mean, I know that's a lesson learned for you guys too, obviously, because that video, unfortunately for you,
we'll put that in the same category as 40 hertz. I mean, a company's got to have its skeletons in the closet, and that's one of our skeletons we can put over in the closet. We can bring them out at Halloween and have a good laugh. But the thing about that that's interesting is I did talk to, the guys in R&D, and at first what was interesting, and this is kind of a behind the scenes, hopefully you guys appreciate this, kind of funny, that they said when I brought it up and started talking about it, the first thing was, well, that's a marketing, we didn't come up with that. That's a marketing number. Marketing said it had to be 200 watts. And then I look at them and go, well, I'm from marketing, and I don't ever remember putting that requirement on you, nor do I remember that. So it almost became one of those, well, you guys said it had to be 200 watts, so you put it on the box. And we're like, no, we put it on the box what you tell us it is. And so it was kind of funny to go back and forth on that. It's just that humorous thing. It's like kind of like, no. But what it really was is The first thing is those two amplifiers, the 200.1 and the 200.2, those amplifiers were designed, and by power sports, it's kind of misleading, although they were designed for really, really low current charging systems, like bikes, scooters, things that, you're lucky if it's got a 10 to 15 amp stator charging system on it. They just don't have a big battery, and they don't have a big charging system. So there's no power supply in those amplifiers, which the cool part is, they kind of just float along and they're happy. So whatever voltage and current that whatever it's on can provide, they just give you everything they can. And if you've got enough voltage and current, they'll make that power. But the 200.1 is the one in the bunch that it does make power, but you have to test it at the circuit board. And if you test it right at the circuit board pads, it's 200. It's right at 200 watts. But once you account for any type of a plug or unpluggable connector, there's some kind of loss in it. There just is in all of them. There's no perfect one. So when you go through a Molex connector, there's a certain amount of loss that you get through there. So then once you come out and you test at the end of the wires, it falls down just enough that instead of being 200, if I remember your test, Derek, it was like high 160s or 170s. It was like 30 or 40 watts short. Yeah, and that's the one amplifier that kind of fell through the cracks, that it didn't quite make power at the speaker leads. It did at the board. They wanted to call it a 200 watt amp. We'd have been a whole lot better off if we'd just called it a 150 watt amp and moved on down the highway, but apparently there was this desire to call it a 200. But I do know that's the only amplifier that won't make rated power at the speaker leads.
Well, and to back that up, I did a series, I don't know how many videos I did, several videos on this amp that you guys made in 1996, the X50S, which was a competition amp back in the day for the 50 watt class, rated 25 watts by 2. So I had a guy reach out to me that, I usually don't take stuff from people to borrow to test just because I know it probably will blow up, but he's like, no, go ahead. I don't really care. The amp is really good shape. It will look good on the video. And so I got the amp in. I did the amp dyno test. I hooked it up to the quad box, and that was one of my favorite videos where I did all the different things that the SPL guys do by moving the seats and moving the sun visors and pushing the seats forward and hugging the steering wheel and all that. And I got 140 dB out of a 50 watt amp. And the quad box, and that was really impressive to me. And not only that, the fact that this amp is 27 years old and it did all these tests, it just, to me, we talked brands before and not talking about brands, but in my opinion, the Rockfords back in the day and the Kickers all the way have been quality products, and that's really why I've been big fans of both companies for so long, is because I've owned their products from way back and your products from way back, and they just last. It was almost like people go out, and if you have the throwaway mentality, then you may not worry, that to spend a little bit more on an amplifier that's going to last you for years and years and years. But if you're going to be wise with your money, then it makes sense to say, hey, well, I'm comparing $500 versus $200, an example for the CXA 1800, I think 1800 watt amp is around $500, which you can get one off Amazon, a different brand, for a couple hundred. But how many of those are you going to have to replace over the years to match, something like the CXA 1800? And just based on the reliability, based on the tests you guys see that these amps go through, in my opinion, it's one of those things you have to decide, how long am I going to be in car audio? If you're a lifetime car audio kind of person, like a lot of us are, it's worth the investment, right? You want to buy the vehicle that has a good reliability rating. And that's something that we don't really have that you can compare, but that would be very interesting to see, hey, how reliable is a certain brand over the years? And I think, in my opinion, that Kicker is one of the higher ones in that list too. You talk about the things coming right off of the production line, and your failure rates are real low. But I think the other thing that's impressive too is after 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and then we're getting into the almost 30 years that these things haven't been repaired, and they're still putting out their rated power. They're still able to run, these 1-ohm tests and do these SPL tests, which boggles my mind that we didn't blow the amp up. And I don't know. To me, it shows that all this stuff that you guys are doing, you're putting the amps through the torture test. You're ensuring everything meets its specs. You're doing the thermals, all that. That's paying off for people who buy this stuff because it's going to last, right?
You know, and that's the thing. It is going to last. And I get a little, I try not to, but obviously I do. My daily job is I work a kicker, and I'm blessed to work here, and I love my job. But outside of that, you know, I started, you know, probably when I was 12 years old. I'm just a nerd or a geek. I don't take those words as an insult. I proudly wear the badge. If it's electronic or it's computers or it runs on power, or it's got an on-off switch, I've been attracted to it from a very young age. And audio obviously falls into that group. So I like audio. I like exotic audio. I like audio that's so expensive that we as a brand would never make it or do it here because it's just, you'd sell 2 a year and you could never support a company like this. But I'm an audiophile and I'm a videophile. Unfortunately, that gets expensive. But I like those kind of things. But when it comes to what we design, I mean, there's a mentality about like the old school amplifiers. And I have a soft spot in my heart for old school amplifiers, guys, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you bring me an old Punch 45, a Punch 75, if you bring me an old 160 SI, which by the way, the original amps from Kicker were SI, that meant Steve Irby, that's why they were called SI amplifiers. You know, you bring me in like the 80 SI, a little small plate amplifier, if you bring me anything from old Soundstream or old EPI, am I gonna have tears run down my face and all these awesome memories of what I experienced with that product in the day? Yeah, I am, because I'm that guy too. But the thing that I like to drive home to people is, you know, the advances that we've got in technology today have allowed us to do two things. We can make really, really cheap amplifiers that aren't that good, or we can still make really, really good amplifiers, but the really, really good amplifiers are the same cost in some cases. They're a little less expensive, but it's not like you can spend less today on an amp and get the same thing that you bought yesteryear. And the other thing goes along with that is, there are amps today, they're just as good in every aspect, and in fact better than any old school amplifier. Sometimes nostalgia tells us that the older amplifiers were just better in certain ways. It doesn't mean you can't build an amplifier just as good today. And one of the things, besides passing all the tests that we have, which I'll go over here in a second with you if you want to know them, the different tests that we do, is they have to last. Durability, reliability is tops on our list of top everything else. And that's why we tell everyone up front, you walk into a Kicker dealer and you buy a Kicker amplifier, and if you simply buy the right size Kicker wire kit to go with it, it's not that we're trying to be wire sellers. We just know from statistical data, you buy this amp and you hook it up with this 100% copper 8 gauge for this amp, 4 gauge for this amp, 1/0 for this amp. You use the right size wire from the start and get a good ground, you're not going to have problems with that amplifier, which is why we extend the warranty out to 3 years. And then you see the things that you're talking about where these amplifiers are not just 3 years old or 5 years old, they're 20 years old, they're 25 years old. And the reality is it doesn't matter what name is on the amplifier. When you start getting into amplifiers that old, all of us are eventually going to run into an issue where the biggest thing that can fail in those old amplifiers is just the capacitors dry out. And when the capacitors dry out, you have to recap the amplifier, and then it should work just as good as it did new, because there's no other real parts in there that dry out. It's just the capacitors. So I'm even impressed when I see an amplifier of that age pass all those tests and do what it does, and the caps are still good.
Yeah, this is something I wanted to bring up too, because this is obviously another area we've discussed in the past about why you guys do stuff overseas. And I think it just goes without saying that every time we see a comment like this and we see people complain about the new electronics that are not made here, there's really, it's unfortunate, but there's really good reasons why they're not, right? Because the United States just does not produce the raw products like they used to that enables you to get everything and kind of bring it all together here, right? So if Michigan is the place where all the auto manufacturers are, that's where they're going to build all the cars because they have everything there to assemble everything. If China is the location where they have all the warehouses, they have all the factories, they make all the capacitors, all the transistors, they do all the raw aluminum and everything, then why are you going to have everything shipped from there over here to assemble the amplifier and pay a lot more? I'll let Kip describe it probably better than me, but it's all economics is a big portion of it. Obviously, you guys willing to pay 3 times what an amplifier costs today to have it made here? Most people will say yes, but they won't do it. It's all economics, and the reason they do this, and as much as people complain about things being made in China and the fact that, companies like Kicker do it. I think what they fail to realize is the number of employees that Kicker employs to do all the things other than the assembly part, right? And I'll pass it to you.
Yeah. No, since you bring that up, I'll address that. Sitting here today, we're sitting at about 230 employees who work here in the facility right here in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I mean, Steve Irby and this entire company supports 230 families. Could we build an amplifier here in the USA? Yes, if we wanted to invest the cost, the tooling, the vertical integration it would cost to do it, but it would take tens of millions of dollars just to get to the point that you could run one amplifier down your assembly line here in the United States of America. And understand at that point, all the parts that would go onto that circuit board, they're all coming from Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia, Japan. I mean, there is no in the U.S. making all the raw parts that you have. Ironically, I'll pull out, even though they're kind of coming to end of life, our Q-class amplifiers, the IQ amplifiers, we actually sourced some of the parts for that amplifier because the quality we wanted, they were made here in the U.S. and they were of better quality. So we actually bought those parts here, shipped them overseas to our assembler, and they use those parts to assemble it into the final circuit board, then do the final assembly, and then bring it back. We want to do everything we can to build products that are reliable, and we want to support as many families as we can that work for the company. And the reality is, we aren't even though people consider us one of the big players out there, the big manufacturers, we can't even invest the amount of money it would take to vertically integrate and start making amplifiers here. We can't do it. And then we would be in the same boat of, say, ShopVac, and I only use them as an example because I see their tag all the time when I go to Lowe's, is, they're assembled here in the U.S., but it's from globally sourced parts, meaning they're bringing the parts in from all these different places, and they might be doing some small final assembly here, putting it in the box, shipping it out the door. But the thing I'd like to stress is we do everything we can. You can't build an amplifier 100% in the U.S. today. You're sourcing the part. Even if you say I assembled it here, you're getting the parts from somewhere else. There's just no way. So there's no 100% made in the USA amplifier. There's no 100% made in the USA speaker. You might be doing some final assembly and packaging here, but you're not making all those parts from here. So then then you get into a contest of, well, what does it mean when it's 100%, when you say made in USA or engineered in USA? And the FTC and the FCC, they got some pretty clear guidelines that you can only say certain things unless there's a certain percentage of content of your parts that come from the United States and the labor that comes from the United States. And the one thing we're not going to do is we're not going to lie to anyone because it's not ethical, it's not moral, and it's not legal. And we're just not going to do that. The thing I will stress is that you live in a world right now that, like it or not, it's a global sourced world. Everything that you wear, everything that's in your pocket, everything that hangs on your TV at home, whatever it is, I guarantee you those parts came from global or they were manufactured globally. If you wanted to just buy things made in the USA, you'd have a pretty barren home. There wouldn't be a lot of things you'd have in there. But at the end of the day, the thing that I stress to people is, we research and engineer everything here. We test everything here. It passes our standards. And probably the best analogy I could give you is you could hire the same framer to come frame your house. Let's say you're building a new house and you hire a guy to do your framing. And you had two different people hire that same framer. And you look at the one house that the framer did, and it's like all the corners are tight. He did a good job. It's rough framing, but you look at it and go, man, that's a really good job. And then you look at another house he did for another person, and you look at it and go, man, there's a lot of gaps in there, and what's that? And there's some this. And you just look at the same quality and go, it's not the same quality. How did the same person do this? And it really depends on what the person asking for the work to be done, what's their standards, and what are they going to hold the guy to as far as saying, I'll accept that, and I won't accept this. And so when it comes to offshore manufacturing, we have to do offshore manufacturing. We've got no choice. But we have very, very high standards. And I won't point out any brands, but just because there may be a competitive brand that runs down the same factory in a different assembly line, like we may have our stuff built, doesn't mean it's the same standard because we've seen it. We hold them to a very high standards, so high that we QA, QC at the line of assembly, and then we turn around and as you guys saw, we do another QA, QC process right here in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and we will not ship a product globally until it passes a second QA, QC test here in Oklahoma. So we take it seriously.
Well, and to add on to that, I wanted to say that when you think of cheap manufacturing, it's because you bought something cheap. You can have stuff made in China, and I would argue that this is one of the best made phones you can buy. And I don't even think you could really make this better in the United States. You could probably make it as good, but it would cost you a lot more money to do so. It's a matter of what you're buying. If everything's cheap, it's because you bought it cheap. And to even add on top of that, people talk about American-made cars versus cars made overseas. Well, people forget cars from the 60s, 70s, 50s, 40s. You were rebuilding motors every 50, 60,000 miles. Technology has surpassed now, and you can drive an LS Tahoe to 300,000 miles like I did. You can drive a Honda car or a Toyota 4Runner for 300, 400,000 miles. So it's what you're saying and the reality of what you're saying do not match up. It's just not true. It's just a thing people say, and then they just keep saying it and repeating it over and over.
True. Very true.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think everybody wants the United States to be as independent as possible. And I mean, I think it's just, it's the new way of the world, really. It's globally sourced products, and it's just the way it is. And it's 2020 versus, 1985. And it's,
Well, and I think everyone agrees. Like we would all love to have all these jobs here, but it's just reality is different from what we wish sometimes.
yeah, thank you, Thomas. We appreciate that.
TM, what's up? The Marshall.
There was a comment, I'm watching the comments as they go by, and someone asked a question that was worded kind of like why we or other brands don't use great big heat sinks like some other brands may or may not do. What it really boils down to, if you look at heat sink, your heat sink should be designed so that you got enough mass so that you can handle all the dump of the heat that's coming out of your devices, and then once it reaches ambient temperature, can it radiate that heat off enough so that the amplifier stays operational? Aluminum costs money. So if you throw a bunch of aluminum in there, just to throw a bunch of aluminum in there, it costs more money to make that amplifier. Doesn't necessarily mean it will or won't run longer. There's other factors that go into that. But when it comes to designing a final product, you want your engineering to make sense. You want to use enough of everything so that when it's done, it does everything you say it will do. And when I say the word economical, please do not read the word cheap in there, because that's not what I mean. You want to do it as economical as you can so that the end product is something that's a reasonable cost to the manufacturer, it's a reasonable cost to a dealer, and it's a reasonable cost to the end consumer to buy it. And then everyone in that chain can then provide warranty and customer service, and you get great long life out of the product. And we've applied that principle to everything we build since the inception of the company. It's kind of like ingrained in us. We're not going to throw another 5 pounds of aluminum in an amplifier and force every person out there to buy this amplifier with an extra 5 pounds in it when there's only 1% of the people that may or may not appreciate or get any benefit from that extra 5 pounds of aluminum. We're just making everyone pay that cost. Whereas that 1%, maybe that one guy who with that amplifier, he's playing it for 4.5 hours straight at full tilt boogie, and he runs it into the thermal and shuts it down. He might be unhappy. He might say, well, if it had more aluminum, it wouldn't do this. Well, maybe, but if you take your car and put the gas pedal all the way to the floor and never let it up, eventually the motor blows up.
Yeah, you don't drive to work in first gear only. So,
no, you don't.
But I will say that this is something Kip would never say, but I will say it. They're designing these amps in 2020, so they're not getting a design from 1960 or 1970 and using the same old design with a new name on it. And there's a lot of companies out there doing that, and you guys can tell because they're very big amps.
I've seen Big D use the term in a few other shows where he talks about bespoke design. Kicker amplifiers are definitely a bespoke design. I mean, they are designed in-house. They're not cookie cutter. They're our design. They're designed to meet our criteria. And they're not just designed to make power. Power, or how many volts or how many watts, however you want to talk about it, but power out of an amplifier is just one of a whole bunch of characteristics that either means an amplifier sounds good or it doesn't. Is it reliable or is it not? And prime example of that, and I'm not going to pick on a brand, but I know, Derek, you've tested amplifiers. It's not that they may or may not make power, but they're not reliable. And reliability definitely is part of the equation.
Yeah, they can't do 1 minute at full tilt boogie. I think I'm gonna have to start adding that to my test parameters. I'm gonna have to have a lot of things donated because I can't buy and blow up a lot of stuff. But we'll see. We'll see if anybody's up for that challenge, because after we've had this discussion,
The 12 talk challenge.
the 12 talk challenge. Anybody's up for it. If you can do a minute now, it can't be a 10,000 watt amp because I can't feed that much current. So it's gonna have to be 1,000 watts or less for right now until I finish building up my lithium bank. But here's a good question for RX Boom. How much of the amp's internal production is done through automation? I think what he means is a machine doing all the assembly versus Aunt Peggy, plugging stuff in and soldering.
A lot of it is done through automation today. It's called stuffing the board. That's the term that we use, and that's where you take your circuit board and you start putting all the parts on there. And you've got what's called through-hole parts, and you've got surface mount parts. And the difference between that is surface mount parts, you look at the circuit board, there's not a hole through the circuit board, there's just a silver pad, and that part lays down there and then it's soldered into place. It doesn't go through the circuit board. And a through-hole part, like a prime example would be like a transistor or a resistor. Those are the two most common ones. You'll see that the legs actually go through the circuit board and then they're soldered from underneath and on top. The solder flows through and then the legs are cut off. You can automate both of those. Surface mount parts are a whole lot easier to do automation through. To kind of, there's a lot of guys in here who are praising, and you're talking about the amplifiers. Even back in the day when Kicker was making, the SI and the SS and the ZR and the ZX amplifiers and the XS and, made in USA amplifiers, they were final assembled here. They were final tuned here. The biasing was set here. The birth certificate was printed here. The final testing was done, but every single one of those circuit boards was stuffed overseas. Now, it could have been back in that time frame. We've worked with lots of different vendors. They could have been done in Malaysia, Taiwan, Thailand, Korea, Japan. There's lots of different places. But even those American-made amplifiers, guys, those boards were all stuffed overseas.
Interesting fact for today.
Derek, you had some 150 dB L7s.
I did.
Put them on video.
I did. And we talked, Kip and I sent an interesting note because he's like, hey, did you think about the theory of 10 times the power gives you that extra 10 dB? Because we went from 140 to 150, right? When we went from 350 watts to about 3,500.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, y'all going to get me on Aunt Peggy. I just made a name up there. That was like on the fly. But
now, Fuego had a question earlier that I missed, and he was asking about the XR's repairability.
Oh,
and
yeah, the ZRs and
modules.
the ZRs, and I think you guys do still repair those, but I don't know that you have the modules available, right?
Modules are going to be a little tough to come by. Lance might have a few sitting back there in warranty still, but modules would be the hard thing to find. The amplifiers themselves, yeah, we can still repair those in-house. About the only thing that gets into a position where we can't repair an amplifier in-house is if you torch the circuit board. And I know everyone out there who, if you've seen a torch circuit board, you know what I'm talking about, where you've literally burnt through the circuit board, burnt through the traces. Amplifiers can use 2, 3, or 4 layer circuit boards, and once you burn through, you have to replace that circuit board. If we have replaceable boards here, if we still have stock of boards, we can still repair an amplifier, but there are models that, fall out and we don't have the boards anymore. We did it was the walkthrough video that Ernie and I did through the building, and I stopped in the ER to show because they're on the board, and I want to say it was 2006 or 2003. It'll show it in the video, but they actually had boards laying there out of, I think it was a KX650, and they were dated from 2000. It was either 03 or 06, and so we still have circuit boards that go back that far. We're not going to have parts here for every amp forever. But I think the fact that we still have some circuit boards for amplifiers from 2003 to 2006, that says a lot on where we stand on wanting to be able to repair stuff for people. And if you torch a circuit board, you've had some serious damage. Moisture, protection circuit failed, wired backwards, really low impedance. Who knows what happened, but you got to do some serious damage to do that.
Yeah, just the sheer number of products you guys have. It's amazing that you can have
Right.
replacements for 2 or 3 years, much less, we're talking 15, 20 years now for those.
Well, even the federal government only holds car manufacturers to 10 years. I mean, they have to be able to provide replacement parts for a car for 10 years, and then after 10 years, they can stop. Well, the parts are still available because third-party vendors start making the water pumps and the brakes and the things that you need for your car, but the car manufacturer has no liability for parts after they hit the 10-year mark. They kind of figure at 10 years, the car's used up, there's no need for parts, and you're off the hook. You don't have to keep providing parts and body panels and all that stuff. But the aftermarket, they kind of step in and they take over that role, obviously, as well. With what we're doing, there's really no aftermarket to step in. I mean, if we can't repair it, it's probably not repairable.
Right.
Cool. Well, Kip, I'm curious, and I know we've gone over some of it, but do you have some more specs there that
Sure.
that you guys go through? I would love to hear some more of that. And if you guys in the chat have any questions, post them up, and we'll put them on the screen. And when Kip takes a breath, go ahead.
Kip.
So what I'm going to do. Yeah. What I wanted to do is I actually, like I said, I went and talked to Joe today, and he and I went back and I want to go through this because there's no way I can keep all this memorized. Some of them I do and some I don't. But this is basically a document that they use up in engineering, and it's called the Pillars of Kicker Electronics. And obviously we're talking amplifiers. You do that. Kip, we consider different colored amps. Maybe. The only drawback to different colored amps is somebody likes pink and someone else doesn't, or someone likes blue and someone doesn't, or someone likes green. And if you have 7 amplifiers in a lineup, and if you do each one of those in 2 or 3 different colors, then you end up with a bunch of the colors nobody wants on the shelf. And so we get stuck at the end trying to sell off at the end of that life cycle, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years, with selling those off. I'm not saying that colored amps aren't cool. Don't get me wrong. That's not my point. But as a manufacturer, it is a tough decision to go, how many different of this particular item am I going to make in different colors or styles, and how many am I willing to try to work with at the end when the product goes end of cycle? So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, we do look at amplifiers a lot of times, like, Henry Ford looked at cars. You can have any color you want as long as it's black.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's what Steve Ground Pounder said. Any colors you want as long as it's black, or sometimes gray with blue end caps.
Well, you know VU meters sell amps. I'm just saying.
I so wish you signed the NDA. I so wish you signed the NDA, because I'm going to tell you, it's not VU meters. I won't tease you that far. It's not VU meters, but when you talk about customization and color and things like that, we've got a line of amplifiers coming that's going to knock your socks off. And I'm say ready. That much. And there's the patented double wink, and it's going to be pretty cool.
That's sweet.
Our industrial designer and engineers have outdone themselves on a new line of amplifiers we've got coming. They'd probably already be here, but and I'm not saying this to cry a river, but last year and COVID and the slowdown in production and logistics and everything has caused this. Even for us, it's like, man, it's taken us forever to get through any project because it's so slow. Everything has come to a crawl, but they'll be coming soon, and maybe when we get a little further out, closer to it, so it's not too far out, we'll send you a sample, both of you.
Can you imagine how ugly an amp would be if me and Derek just got to design it? We each picked one thing back and forth, and then whatever we ended up with at the end, it'd be like those cars you drew when you were like 6.
Yeah.
Well, I got a feeling Roberts would be covered in stickers. And possibly. Derek's would probably have some kind of high-end etching with some inlay in it. That's what I guess.
Yeah.
You read us good, Kip.
So I'm about both. I can go both ways. I mean, I can like either one. So when it comes to amplifiers, I just want to read through these so you guys have an understanding. Is, when we're designing an amplifier, the things that we design for and has to pass is power, RMS, and dynamic. Signal-to-noise ratio, and total harmonic distortion. SNR, or signal-noise ratio, is literally what it is. It's signal-to-noise of the amplifier. And what we don't want is for you to have an amplifier that when the gain's properly set and you sit in your car and you hear shh. If you hear that, it means your gain's too high, or the amplifier just has a really, really bad signal-noise ratio. We do not want bad SNR at all. THD,
or you have a dirty Bluetooth
distortion.
Adapter. Sorry.
Yeah.
The Bluetooth,
that's
some
true
of them
too.
can be very noisy.
Very true. Our amplifiers, for us, it's important. We do not do single-ended inputs. And by single-ended, any amplifier that the shield of the RCA is just tied to ground, that's called a single-ended input. Single-ended inputs have no ability whatsoever to reject any noise that gets introduced onto the signal cable going to the amplifier. Every single kicker amplifier we make uses a differential input or balance. It's not really balanced, although people call it that. Calling it balanced is like calling an infrasonic filter a subsonic filter. You know what we mean, but it's just a different word. But we use diff inputs. Grounds are floating. You can take speaker leads directly into our amplifiers, but that gives us a common mode noise rejection capability of over 40 dB, which is huge. So any single-ended amplifier, we're 40 dB better than any single-ended amplifier minimum at rejecting noise that comes in over an RCA cable. We look at noise reliability, and these are the things we look at. We call this reliability, but it covers these specific topics. Time to thermal, so how long does the amplifier run before it goes into thermal overload, trips and protects itself. Power supply short circuit protection, Class D overcurrent protection, over voltage protection, and under voltage protection. And all of those together have criteria that a kicker amplifier has to, it's a go, no go, it's a pass. It has to meet this minimum or it's not even going to be available. And if I go through here, Ernie, are you awake back there? Oh, yeah. Will you bring up graph number 1 for me? Because now that we're here, I want to show this. So this graph that I pulled up here, this is an actual graph of a kicker amplifier underneath a power sweep. And this sweep that you see going on here, guys, it takes 60 seconds to run this test right here. And as you can see what it is, we're looking at total power output versus total harmonic distortion. So distortion is on the left-hand side, power is on the bottom of the graph. And this particular amplifier, you can see it ran out to 2.3, oh, this must be a KXA 2400. This amplifier ran out to 2.349, and you can see then the distortion starts going up and up and up. And this is representative of a typical distortion versus power output curve of a well-built amplifier. It stays well below the 0.1% all the way through the graph. It even is lower in certain spots, as you can see. And then when it runs out of juice, it runs out of juice. You're going to get more distortion out of it. That part at the end there where it almost takes a vertical climb, that line can vary depending on amplifier design and how you design them. Sometimes it's more vertical, sometimes it can be a little less vertical. But the bottom line is you get to an amplifier's full output capability and you reach that little dot at the bottom, it's going to start increasing in distortion pretty fast. But this is one of a well-designed amplifier. So that is an output curve of a well-designed amplifier. Ernie, bring up graph number 2. This is a curve of a not very well-designed amplifier at all. And as you can see here, it's going through the same 60 seconds, the same thing, 60 seconds to get it done. You can see this amplifier out there. It reached about 3,000 watts at the very end. This is a competitor's amplifier. You can see it starts off at a very high distortion. It's above 1% just to start with. So it's over 1% before you even turn the thing on. It's just sitting there idling. You can see the distortion falls as you start turning it up. It finally gets down to below 0.2%. As you almost reach its full clean output power, or around, not full clean, but about a third to a fourth of it. And then you see it takes a big spike up in distortion, goes back up, gets up over 1%. It climbs back down a little more till it gets to the very end of what it's got, and then it just starts crawling out, and it's just nothing but a lot of distortion there. That is a graph of what we refer to as a poorly designed amplifier, and there are lots and lots and lots of those amplifiers out there. Now, this amplifier that's on this graph, I'm not going to talk about brand, maker, model. It doesn't matter. It's just a competitor's amplifier. Does it make power? Yeah, it makes power. You can see right here on the graph, it made power, made about 3,000 watts. Did it make good, clean power? No. Not one bit at all. So this is where we kind of talk about, and I jokingly tell people, if it's all about power, if that's all you're worried about is how many volts you're going to swing out the speaker terminals of your amplifier, man, skip the amplifier. You don't even need it. Just back your car up to the light pole, go up there, climb up. Man, there is tens of thousands of volts available up there. It's all at 60 hertz. Just get all you want. It's going to be great. Lots of voltage. And people go, why? It doesn't make any sense. And that's like kind of how we look at it. Well, if all you look at is power output of an amplifier, and that's your criteria to judge if it's a good or a bad amplifier, you're missing the point too, because it takes more than just voltage for an amplifier to sound good and be reliable. So I wanted to touch on those power curves. I thought you'd find those interesting. Those are off of, obviously, AP testing here, off of an actual kicker amplifier. And going to throw down Ernie's in slower. Ernie's in the back by himself tonight, so he might be snoozing a little bit. You never know. We were actually doing, I'll tell on Ernie, we were doing a show one night just like this, where it was just me coming on a show, and I needed something up on the screen, and I just said, Ernie, And there was no response. I said, Ernie. And so I got up and I walked back, and Ernie was snoring. So I just reached down to the switcher and hit what I needed and left and came back up here. It was kind of funny.
We need to get you a remote control.
Yeah.
Exactly. That'd be cool right there.
Here's a question. Biggest CXA kicker mono, is that the 1800? CXA 1800?
Currently, yes.
Currently, yes. Wink.
Oh, hit him with the wink. Hit him with the wink. I'll tell you what, though.
Currently, yes.
The 2-ohm CXA 1800, you can definitely run that at 1 ohm. Kip's not going to allow for that, but that thing puts out some juice. Have you tested one, Derek? Yeah, that thing puts out some juice. I'll say that.
I actually would like to get, since we've got an amp dyno here, now we have two of them. We got the AMM one and we've got the big one like you guys have. So we do testing here. The thing that's always in the back of my mind is no matter what we do here, people are always like, you're cheating. What's hidden under the bench? You're cheating. And when you guys do the test, there's a certain, even though we could get the exact same numbers, there's more credibility because it's you guys testing. It's like a third party testing our products, not us testing our own products. And we realize that, but we still do dyno tests and we show them. We may even do a show one night. We do some live dyno tests on a few amplifiers just to show people that. But I've wanted to get a CXA 401 and a CXA 801 in your guys' hands, both of you, for testing. It's just that between sales and between the ability to get products, I haven't had any to send you because I'd love for you guys to get your hands on those. And what you'll see out of those two amplifiers, just look at that. Look at what they do for RMS power. Look at what they do for dynamic power. Excuse me, the dinner was attacking me there. And project that forward on future CXA amplifiers that may be coming out from us. And because the 400 and the 800 are the first two that went through a redesign with our engineer in the CX line. And they're pretty amazing amplifiers. And so what we've stumbled upon, what we're doing there, you're going to see that come in future CX amplifiers. But yeah, the biggest one right now is 1800.
The teases never fail.
He can't help it. It's just in his DNA. It's in his DNA.
It's
Kip, your grandfather sold snake oil, did he? Because you're very good at this.
Had that big jacket.
You're definitely not selling snake oil, but you were very good at this. It makes me think it runs in the bloodline at some point, somewhere.
If I was, maybe some night I'll get my brothers on here because that'd be a hoot to get my brothers on here. I'm the oldest. I have a total of 4 brothers and a sister, and I'm the oldest. And my brother Kevin, I don't know if he's watching right now, but my brother Kevin, who spent his life in law enforcement, he just retired last August from law enforcement. And but he's a great guy. My brother Kevin is, when it's work time, it's work time, but when it's off work time, it's off work time. And he knew how to differentiate between play and work, and he's a great guy. I love him to death. But my brother Kevin, he's that guy that could stumble off the balcony, fall into a big pile of dinosaur manure, and when he finally crawled out of the bottom of the pile, he'd have the keys to a brand new Corvette. He'd already be showered, have on a fresh pair of clothes, and he'd have 3 or 4 women say, "Can I have a ride?" He can sell anything, and he can walk into any bad situation. He comes out just on top. I do sometimes, but not like him.
Oh, I'd kill for the Litsey brothers, like the whole Litsey brother crew. Like,
he was in law enforcement.
He was in law enforforcement.
Well, sounds like he needed to be selling. Maybe that's a after retirement job.
Can I say this? Can I say it? Are you sure? Oh my Lord, this might be hilarious. Okay, you guys ready for a laugh? My brother's going to kill me. All right, you're going to laugh. Is he watching?
I don't think he's watching.
Okay, so my brother Kevin, this is hilarious. My brother Kevin retired last August, and we spent his retirement. It was when we were down at the beach. We tried to connect down there, Derek, at the beach at Emerald Isle.
Yes.
We were down there and so it was family vacation. We were all together. Me and my brothers and family were vacation down there on Emerald Isle for a week, and it was also he took vacation and then he retired right after it. He didn't even go back to work. He just took his vacation and then was out. And so we're sitting there, and of course, we're having adult beverages. I'm sure I'll get joked about here for some twisted tea. I like a twisted tea every now and again, along with a little bit of Jameson. I mean, when it's off work time, it's off work time. And we're talking about everything, and my brother, That's awesome. So we're talking, and my brother Kevin's like, he says, I don't know what I'm going to do. He says, I'm going to retire. He says, the environment's not friendly to law enforcement right now. He said, there's a lot of great law enforcement officers that, you get that one bad apple and they think we're all bad. And he says, I'm just retiring. He says, I've reached the point where I can retire, get most of my benefits. And he said, I'll go find a civilian job and do something. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm done with law enforcement. Okay, bro. So we're all laughing and cutting up and having a good time. Well, a few weeks later, vacation's over, we get back home. A few weeks later, he sends a group text to all of us. He says, hey, I went in for an interview. Great, what'd you do, bro? He said, well, I went in. They were looking for a head of security, and I went in and interviewed for head of security. And when the interview was over, they offered me to be the operations manager of the whole facility. And Kevin's like, we're like, wow, bro, what'd you, what's that? And he's not really wanting to tell us. He's kind of holding back. He's like, well, I'm going to think about it, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to take the job. I went in, I was going to be the interview for head of security, but they offered me operations. I get to run the whole thing. It's something I've never done before, but it's a new experience and blah, blah, blah. We're like, yeah, bro, what is it? And he won't tell us. And finally he says, well, it's an operation that's just opened up, and they are growing the green recreational pharmaceuticals, and they're making edibles and all those kinds of things. So my brother, who was in law enforcement, is now in charge of a company that makes said products. And trust me, we have a great time ribbing him.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Hey, Ground Pounder, thank you. This is a passion there are people that, it's a 9-to-5 job. This certainly is a 9-to-5 job for me. It's certainly not for Ernie. He doesn't even have to be here. And he's like, yeah, I want to hang around. I want to be here. I want to help you out. There's a lot of us inside this building that's a passion. We enjoy making audio products. We get that chicken skin. We get the goosebumps when we get to experience some great products. I got that feeling. You can't have a name like Clip, a nickname here, and not be the guy. We actually had some L7X12s and test enclosures back in the lab day before yesterday. Well, actually, we showed the video on Unmasked Tuesday night. And they had these back there, and I'm just back there, and I'm bringing up bass mechanic and some old school stuff, and I'm just testing it through there, and I'm taking the amp right up at clipping, and man, it's awesome. Just the bass coming out of that L7X is just awesome. I got people coming down from upstairs, down the hallway, they're coming into the lab, and you guys know the one, it's the listening test room, and they're like, hey, man, how's that sound to you? Sound good? I go, yes. Are you about done? No, I'm not about done. I'm having fun. So, it is a job that's fun. Like I tell, it is a job, but I tell, people, most days don't suck. It's pretty cool. I get to do what I love, so it's pretty fun. It was either this or computer programming and business management, which is what I went to college for. So, this was more fun.
Are you considering a presidential run in 2024?
I think I am as qualified, if not more so, than any of the candidates on the ballot. So I think with your help, I need a VP, so I don't know if it's going to be, it's going to be Robert or it's going to be Derek, but I need a VP, and of course, then I need somebody, to run the place. So I think we should just move in and clean house.
Yeah, I say it's got to be Derek or Bill Frog, one or the other.
I'm not corrupt enough. Sorry.
Well, that's the problem.
If I went in as president, I'd be the most short-lived president there ever was because there'd be no corruption. I'd want a clean house. I would be an open target. They would want me gone because I wouldn't put up with it.
You'd be taken out the first week. That's
shortest
not allowed.
He was sworn in at noon and he was dead by 1:30. Man, imagine that.
Yep. Nope. Can't do it.
Can't do it. So, the test, we kind of went through those are the pillars. Signal noise ratio. We reference signal noise ratio at 1 watt. This is a trick a lot of companies will do. If you reference your signal noise ratio at full output power of the amplifier, so if it's a 100 watt amplifier or a 10,000 watt amplifier, what it is, if you reference your SNR to full power, you can show a nice big number, but then when you get down to 1 watt, which is real, you're really going to notice it and see it, your signal noise ratio number is horrible. We reference everything to 1 watt when we do our SRN numbers. And El Fuego, you're in. You're on my ballot. My cabinet is forming. Attorney General, sure. You just have to like Twisted Tea and be honest. Other than that, we're on. So on our amplifiers, like when it comes to anything that's a monoblock or subwoofer amplifier, it has to be 70 dB or greater SNR on those. And then on anything that's a full range amplifier, it's got to be 75 dB or greater. And so those are our minimums. Most every amp we put out is typically in the 80s. Some of it approaches 90s. But our line in the sand is it has to be 70 or 75. And that line in the sand is because at 1 watt, with the gain set properly, you can't hear noise out of an amplifier at these SNR readings. And I make a big deal about that because, and I'm not going to say who, But there's a particular amplifier that went up, we tested here in-house, and its signal-noise ratio at 1 watt was 35 dB.
Ooh.
35. And
Nice.
it's that's pretty common to see. So, low price, you're giving something up typically for that lower price. Now, what you're giving up, I don't know. It could be warranty, it could be customer service, and that's it. It might be a great amplifier, but after the sale, there's just nothing there. It could be you're giving up, there's not enough design in it that it's got that. This is one very well-known, popular amplifier, and its signal-noise ratio at 1 watt is 35 decibels. So, yeah, we're not going to sacrifice that to build a cheaper amplifier. It's not going to happen. So that's it right there. Noise rejection, we test that. Like I said, we go into that. It has to reject a minimum of 40 dB of noise over the RCA cables. So that's a pretty big deal on that. Reliability testing, we go through. It's the turn on, turn off times have to be tested. So we don't want there to be turn on or turn off noises. We actually take that into account. I mean, I know you've tested a lot of amps where you turn them on, turn them off, thump, 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 thump. Because they have no delays that are properly built in to make sure the amplifier is up to a stable operation before it's turned on, kicked over. That's a big deal to us. Short circuit testing, I mean, our guys, and I think it's 10 times in a row is what they do, but they literally take the speaker leads, amplifiers under power, under test, playing a signal, and they take the speaker leads and short them together. Amplifier has to go into short circuit protection. When you remove it, it has to come out of short circuit protection. It has to do that 10 times in a row before that circuit is validated as, yes, it works, it's doing its job. So we literally short test. Yeah, is it going to blow up? I don't know. Let's find out. Well, blew up. That's not going to work. Let's find out why. It has to be able to pass that test there. Over voltage testing, we shut our amplifiers off at 15.6. There's a lot of guys that may talk about higher voltage, but realistically, in an average consumer car, if you have more than 15.6 volts in that car, you've got other problems. You may have a regulator in your alternator that's gone bad. You got a runaway alternator, and forget the amplifier staying on. If you've got that kind of high voltage, you're going to start damaging all the other computers and electronics that are in the car. So at 15.6, we shut them off because there is no point in that amplifier being functional in that car. We do low voltage testing. Typically 9.5 to 10.5 is our range. It depends on the amplifier and the design. If you look at the new stuff that we've done, anything that's got start-stop built into it, like the key amplifiers, the new CXA 401 and 801 have start-stop built into them. You can be in any of these cars where they come to a complete stop, motor turns off, car starts back up as soon as you hit the gas pedal. In a lot of cases, the amplifiers will turn off and then turn back on because they can't handle that low voltage drop. We are starting to design that into all of our amplifiers where we will actually stay on and operational down to, I think it's 6 volts is what we call it, and that works with just any start-stop test system that's out there. So that's the thing that we test for. Time to thermal testing, we kind of already talked about that. When we do the life cycle test, it's got to run from cold, that amplifier's got to run for a solid 45 minutes at full output power with 10 dB gain overlap. And like I said with Joe, it depends on the amp. That could be anywhere from 10% to 40% THD. So is that amplifier getting driven beyond its capability? Yep. And it's got to run for 45 minutes. And then it's got to live for 24 hours. Now, it may cycle on and off from thermal during that 24 hours, but it's got to, at the end of that 24 hours, it's got to be fully functional, operational, all circuits work, and it had to run the first 45 minutes with no shutdown. So I'll be a U.S. ambassador in Kip's administration. Jesse, your job, brother. It's all yours. Music testing, we talked about that. It has to pass music, no turn on, turn off pops. And then, of course, the life cycle testing, which is, that big one we discussed there. So when you go through those, and then the dyno test. We have started to incorporate dyno tests, even though we have the SMD devices, and they tend to be very, very accurate, if not spot on. We do all of our dyno tests through AP. The Audio Precision one, they just came out with a new model and new software that actually does controlled dyno, so you can set up whatever your parameters are and do dyno testing. We also dyno test all our amplifiers. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but coming to the end of that list, it's a topic that's, I could do a whole show on this topic, but I don't want to. But I do want to say that with dyno testing, for example, I've got boxes here. I'm going to pick one. I'm just going to find one here and pick it.
I did have one concern with Kip's administration. Since we are all part of the Kicker family, is this going to be considered nepotism? Because I don't want that to happen. It's going to be a bad look on all of us. We'll have to figure it out. We can figure it out, after we've won, we can figure it out.
Ladies and gentlemen, look at me and believe my words. You and I both know for a fact we can run this country better than anyone has in the last 20 years. Are you with me? Get on the party. 2024, we're going to run it.
There we go. Cut that out, Derek.
Should have gone full screen with that one.
That was it.
So something that's interesting, I brought these are actually empty boxes, but just like design a product, we have to design boxes, packing, everything that goes into a product, we have to design here and then get it made. So these are first run boxes of the new KXMA amplifiers that will, hopefully the first shipment of these will be arriving pretty soon. But the controversial peak power that everyone likes to put on their boxes. And we do the same thing. At the end of the day, there are a lot, and I hope everyone will take this in the right light. There are a lot of uneducated buyers, and no matter how hard you try, some of them cannot be told the way things are with a product. All they know is they look at this box and it says 3,000 watts peak, and they go over to this box and it says 1,500 watts RMS, and then they look at the price tags and they go, oh, this is the value, this is the best amplifier. It's 3,000 watts. It's 3,000 watts peak, man. That's the amp. And so it's been a controversial topic forever. It was a controversial topic when I was in retail. That's over 33 years ago. So we have always used peak numbers on our amplifiers. Now, here's the thing, and I think we'd actually need to do another show about this because it's deep. But you can take any amplifier. Let's just pick a number. Let's call it a 400 watt RMS amplifier. A 400 watt RMS amplifier, if you understand how you measure work, because you can't, AC is literally just going back and forth, back and forth. It doesn't do anything. It's just changing. And the only reason you see it do something is because of time, you see it create sine waves. But that sine wave, you can't talk about work. So when you talk about the work component, RMS is how you calculate a sine wave and you turn it into a DC, kind of a DC equivalent of what's the work that this is actually doing. That's what RMS tells you, is how much work, power, whatever's happening, because you look at a sine wave, okay, it's not at the top the whole time, it's not at the bottom the whole time, and you can't use the word average, but you're getting the root mean square and you're saying, okay, out of this AC sine wave, how much real work am I getting out of it, okay? And that's where RMS comes from. But here's what's cool about it. And we'll do a show on this because I can spend hours on this talking about it. You take a 400 watt RMS amplifier and you do the science on it. You sit down on a piece of paper and you draw it out, because RMS, basically when you're looking at the voltage swing on a sine wave, to get down to RMS, it's 0.707 of peak. So if you take the peak of the sine wave and you convert it into true RMS and you go through the whole formula, it actually works out to be, it depends on which direction you're going. It's either 0.707 of peak is RMS, or RMS times 1.401 is peak. Either way you do it. But when you take that peak voltage and you calculate it, 400 watts RMS is 800 watts peak. So when you look at a kicker amplifier, unlike a lot of companies out there that put out an amplifier that its RMS is, let's just say it's 200 watts RMS, and they'll put 1,500 watts peak on the box or 2,000 watts peak on the box. And Derek's here to confirm I'm not making this up. Amplifiers that make realistically low numbers will have exaggerated, unbelievable, realistically huge numbers on there for peak power ratings. Why? Because there's a lot of customers that all they know is they look at how many watts and what's the price tag, and when I find this number that's really big and this number that's really small, I found a value. And actually what you did is you just got taken to the cleaners because you didn't find a value at all. You got a cheap, underbuilt, underfed amplifier that they had to lie to you just to get you to buy it. So the one thing I will say, so the one thing I'll say is, in all the years that Kicker has used peak power ratings on some of our amplifier products, if you notice, it's always been double RMS. And the reason it is because even though it really won't do 800 watts, it won't do it, it's peak. But by math, by science, a 400 watt RMS amplifier is an 800 watt peak amplifier. So it's the most honest peak number that there is, to be quite honest. So even in all that controversy, we've tried to do what we can and keep an even keel where we feel good from a moral and an ethical and a legal standpoint. Is that, if it's a 400 watt RMS amplifier, we'll call it 800 watts peak. And as Derek can attest, if we call it 400 watts, it's typically going to be high 4s to mid 5s. That's what it does for power rating. So you're always getting more power than you pay for. But that old, peak power is on there, and an uneducated buyer doesn't say anything about it, and an educated buyer goes, man, but get that peak number off there. What are you guys talking peak for? Peak doesn't tell me anything. Well, It kind of does and it kind of doesn't. If the power supply was overbuilt enough to handle the voltage swing, that 400 watt RMS would peak at 800 watts, but most of them don't, including ours. We're not going to completely double our power. So it is a fictitious number, but at least ours is mathematically accurate.
So I think it would be good to compare, though, if everybody was using the same standard. Since they're not, then to me, showing that number, it just, I don't know. That's my thoughts on it, because you've got a 1,000 watt amp that says it does 5,000 watts peak, right? We know that doesn't fit into your equation at all, but we pretty much know that, why are we even saying it then in that case? Let's just talk about the true RMS power and then forget about the peak. But I understand, because you're trying to say, hey, this is a comparative with another brand that doesn't use the true, calculation to 0.707, but they don't use it anyway, so you're not able to truly compare.
You're 100% right. And no, and you know what? You're going to like this, Derek, because what we have made a decision, and of course we can't change everything at once because we have so many products that we have to do a rolling change. So when we're redesigning a product, it's everything. It's the product, it's the packaging, it's the manual, and then we have to wait until that all flushes through the system where we do a running change before we can change big things, because we have to get the current product out, do an update, and go to where we're going to go. So as a company, we've made a decision that we are officially removing from this line of so this is the first line of amplifiers that has it. So from this forward, peak power ratings are going to be gone from all kicker amplifiers. They're removed. We're throwing them in the trash can. What we are going to do, and maybe, I don't know if Ernie can get a good close-up of this on cam 1. Maybe he can. I don't know. We'll see. Okay. There you go. Maybe you can see. I hope maybe you can't. I'm trying to get it out of the glare here. Can you see it? Okay, if you look at this amplifier in that box, you'll see it says 1,500 watts dynamic power, 1,200 watts RMS power. So this is the new packaging for the 1202 in the KXMA line of amplifiers, and you notice that there's no longer a peak power rating on here. This 1,500 watts dynamic power, as you know, Derek, and you know, Robert, this is a measurable number. An amplifier does have dynamic headroom. It can, for short bursts of time, produce more power if there's headroom in the power supply and headroom in all the output devices and everything in the amplifier. And that's real power. That's not make-believe power. That's real power. Okay? The thing is, it's not that this amplifier is going to do 1,500 watts for 60 seconds on a dyno test. This amplifier is going to do 1,200 watts for 60 seconds on a dyno test. But with music, and that's where, you got to know what you're talking about. Testing under a constant sine wave into a fixed load is not real world, but it does help you design an amplifier that's reliable. Music is dynamic. Music, whatever you listen to, unless you're trying to float bricks and babies, that's a different thing, but we won't go there.
I thought Kip was fixing a scat. I'm not going to lie.
I'm just a little loose tonight. It's not my show. I'm just the host or guest. He's the host. So, but we're going to move all of our amplifiers. Yeah, we're going to move all of our amplifiers to this. And what's cool about this is, so I pull up one of these and they come in and I send this to Big D and he goes and puts it on the amp dyno, does a video for you guys. He'll be able to see that this amplifier does 1,200 watts continuous. It's actually going to do more than that, but it'll do the guaranteed 1,200 watts. And he's going to be able to do that dynamic burst testing that you see on the amp dyno. And you'll see this amplifier will make a true 1,500 watts or more of dynamic power. So we are moving away from peak power completely, and we are moving to the two numbers that are actually measurable and mean something, which is RMS power and dynamic power. And I figured there was no other show or other guest that I should talk about this topic on, so I'm kind of letting the cat out of the bag a little bit, but this is the show to talk about it on. And we'll talk about it, deeper on Unmasked, probably in a future show, but I couldn't think of a better show to launch and talk about this. We're talking about power and amp dynos and testing, and what you guys have done for the entire industry and the enthusiasts is to, get people to at least put out honest numbers and let us know what we're talking about. The thing for us that becomes a challenge is now what we see as a company that's important is it's not just about power when it comes to an amplifier. It's about all those other criteria, those pillars of making a product. And we're trying to figure out how can we show people in demonstrable ways why these are the criteria we build for, why these are the go, no good numbers that we go with, and what do you get as a consumer when you buy an amplifier? Here's 500 watts and here's 500 watts. This amplifier is another $100, but what am I getting for that? If I'm still getting 500 watts on both, then what else am I getting? Why should I spend another $100 over here? Why should I spend another $150? And we're trying to figure out, here's two F-150 trucks, but this one's $5,000 more. Oh, but this one has leather, cruise, tilt, power locks, windows, and air. This one doesn't. So they're both trucks. They both have the same motor. They both will pull the same. They'll do all the basic things the way, but what am I getting extra for spending that extra money? So this is the first step. We're getting away from peak power because it doesn't mean anything. It's misleading to the consumer. These are going to be reliable, real numbers that mean something to you. Are we hoping the rest of the industry catches up and comes on board? We'd love for them to, but we don't care if they do because we feel good about this from both an ethical, a moral, and a legal standpoint. At least the numbers on the boxes are something that can be verified by any independent tester or us that that's real power coming out of this amplifier. And there's the big number. Can you get it? Sure. Under musical conditions, that amplifier will produce 1,500 plus watts. So awesome. I hope you appreciate. I mean, when you asked me to come on here, it was like this is the perfect show to talk about this. I had to bring these out.
That is awesome. Much appreciated.
I think in the long run, it's going to be so much better for people to see those numbers and see these realistic numbers from you guys. And I think it's good that you have the Unmasked Weekly now because now you're communicating with the community. So you're on here and you can tell them like, hey, this is why we do this. This is why we do that. And they can see the thought behind it. So then that makes them, it kind of brings them into the fold more, I think, instead of just someone being a knucklehead and be like, oh, kicker sucks. This is only 1,500 watts, dynamic.
And don't be so humbled to not believe that the things we're doing like this and the shows that you guys do for the community and the reason we got into Unmasked and we see the value in this isn't because of the pioneers like you guys doing what you're doing. You've pushed the envelope. You have made things so transparent for people, which is all good things. Now for us, the key is, okay, now we got to be able to show even more things that are transparent that may or may not be easy to understand, and it's up to you to make the decision if you want to do that or not. I don't want to say what amplifier this is, although it is representative of a large category of amplifiers that, people, some people say, Korean amps or Chinese amps or Brazilian amps, they all kind of have a term because they think that amplifier is that way because it comes from that country. It's just, it gets that name. It's just an amplifier design. You could build that amplifier design anywhere. It's just that a country. What'd I miss?
I tried to share something. We tried to share the same thing twice in a row. Oh my gosh! I will say,
but this is.
Before we logged off, Kip, you don't have to say anything, but I want me and Derek to guess which amp that is, and I have a prop for my guess. So I'm gonna grab it real quick. Think about the amp with the terrible graph. I'm gonna grab my prop and you think about it while I'm gone.
Yeah, I mean, without even having an audio precision, what Kip just showed with that one that started off above 1%, I see plenty of amps that I test that as soon as I start the test, they're already above, the distortion light's already on the dyno. So it's already measuring that without even looking at it on a scope or anything else. Yeah, I can see that, I don't even count those even performing on the certified test if they can't do the entire test at 1% or less, then I don't even consider that a test. But he's not going to tell us. I don't even know why we're going to guess.
What's your guess?
He's not going to tell us.
I know I don't want him to tell us. I want your guess because I know that the chat. Tell me what your guess is, Wade. You're thinking just like me.
Yeah, that's good. I want to hear from the chat. I want to hear yours first.
I got a prop, and this one was actually sent to me by my boy Big D to play with. This is my guess. Not this one, the 3,000 watt version. Possibly the Smart 3. Just like Wade said. I mean, it's not a Woody. The Woody didn't make 3,000 watts, and that amp clearly made 3,000 watts. We know that these welders make power.
Yep.
But we also know that they kind of sound like doo-doo. Everyone that I've played with.
So, this is not related to that at all, and I had a question for Kip, but I'll wait. Sorry. I got a
sure?
different question that's related to something
Okay.
else.
I'm
I'm trying to think. Go ahead.
I don't
There's
want to
no
call
pile
out.
amplifier that makes 3,000 watts. Whoever commented pile. Sorry.
Yeah. No.
If they master slave do all that situation and
Like 10 of them, bridged together maybe.
did
Ooh.
did the amp catch on fire in that
Yeah.
graph?
Did it make it through that test, Kip, or was that a fiery?
Here's I really don't want to call out all I'll say is
don't call it out.
This is a design style or a class of amplifiers that people use. They say, oh, this is a X style amplifier.
Brazilian.
And
We said it.
Yeah. Well,
ready.
that's the thing.
if it was that graph, those two graphs I showed you on the AP, those power graphs, those tests take 60 seconds to run. So it starts and it does that graph and ramps everything up, and it takes a full 60 seconds. This class of amplifiers, if you hook them up to a reactive load, like a speaker, they'll play. They'll hang in there. They'll make power. They'll kind of do what they say they're going to do. They may not have great signal noise ratio. They may be high on THD. There may be some other boxes that we can talk about that we want to talk about what makes a good amplifier. But will they make power? Yes. But when you put that amplifier on a fixed resistor load, those amplifiers typically will not run more than 3 to 10 seconds on that test before they flame. Some of them go out in less than a second under a fixed resistive load trying to make full power and do those tests. So we've actually had to modify our AP testing to go in, and when we're testing amplifiers like that, we want to see what power they make, but we have to do it almost like a dynamic test because it won't pass our 60-second, this is what an amplifier has to do,
Right.
let's run it through, let's look at distortion. They won't complete the test. Our engineers have to rebuild them and go back and test them again because they won't pass that test. So I want to draw a line in the sand between reactive load and fixed load, which also goes back to what I said on the show 2 weeks ago. A fixed resistive load, 50 hertz, full sine wave, you can't be any harder on an amplifier than that. You are beating it to death doing that.
Right.
And it's, our amps do it. I'm not going to be shy about it. Yeah, we built some great amplifiers. We designed some great amplifiers. We have standards that our amplifiers have to meet. Are our amplifiers the least expensive bunch of amps you can buy out there? Absolutely not. They're not. But they do what they say they do. They pass the pillars of Kicker. They come with a fantastic warranty. Throw a Kicker wire kit in. We believe in them so much we'll extend the warranty out to 3 years. And what's refreshing to me is you don't have to believe a word I say. You got guys like Derek and Robert are testing amplifiers that are 25 to 30 years old that were designed under the same philosophy we design amplifiers today, and they're still out there running. So do we make a good amplifier? Yeah, we make a great amplifier.
Yeah, agreed. And going back to the whole power thing, that we talked about already, and I know we're getting along here on this episode, so we'll have to round it up pretty quick here. But what I wanted to get to with that was, when I first started doing these tests 7-8 years ago, whenever it was, I started putting the videos up with specific power output tests. I had two purposes. In the beginning, it was to find out what these old school amps that I had laying around, what they really did. Because, back in the old days, a lot of times they were rated at 12 volts and they were rated at really low THD. So if you had an amp that said it was 20 watts by 2, in a lot of cases it could be as much as 40 or 50 watts by 2. So I wanted to do some tests. So that was initially. But then I had people say, well, what about this 1500 watt, XYZ brand? And my thought was, oh, okay, let's do that. So we test it and find out the power is close to 1,500 watts. But then we started noticing all of these claims that were far-fetched. So then it came to, let's at least find out, can it do it what its rated power is. But I understand what you're saying too, Kip, and it's not that I want to say that the power is the most important part, but I think it's a component that if you're going to be, if you're going to be misleading on the power part, what else are you going to be misleading on? So I think we hit that first, and that was a goal to try to put brands into a certain category, and even the stuff like from Rockville now. If you look at their power ratings, they have 3 different power ratings because they say use this rating if you're comparing it to Rockford Fosgate, Kicker, Audio Control, JL Audio. Use this rating. Use the second rating if you're comparing it to brand X, brand Y, brand Z. Use the third one if you're comparing it to this. It's like, why do we have to have all these different comparisons when there should just be one? And I think the fact that, showing people the dyno, even though it's just power, it still shows, hey, this is one thing that they're meeting. Once we get past that point, and I hope we're getting close to it, then we move on to, hey, what's important other than that? Signal noise ratio, reliability, all these things that are above and beyond just the power. But, we've been battling that for years, is just to try to get people to be honest with what kind of power numbers they're putting out. So my feeling about it now is, I don't care if you put an unrealistic power number on your amp. I want you to, because I'm going to get it and I'm going to test it and I'm going to show people what it really does. That's a slap to your face for not doing the right thing. For me, it's great because people, oh, look at this. It's $100. It says it's 10,000 watts. No. So I'm fine with that. That gives me more views. But I'm just hoping that eventually we'll get to the point where the manufacturers will be honest. I think we're getting better. Still got a long ways to go, but that's my soapbox about that. I'm sorry to go on so long about that. But Kip, we're really, we're running like an hour and 40, almost 50 minutes. So I did want to thank you immensely for coming on here tonight, and all the information you provided has been extremely useful. Thanks for letting you use your clip showing the KXA 2400 and it running for 3 minutes solid. Awesome stuff. We hope everybody who's listening and watched this, and we've had a very lively chat tonight as well. Thanks everybody for joining in with that, and make sure you check out Kicker Unmasked Live Tuesday nights, 7 Central. 7:30 Central. I'm sorry, 7:30 p.m. Central. Check them out because they have some really good content there. Have a lot of fun in the chat room. Same guys usually that are here or there, and they teach you a lot other than their products. So I think it's really cool, and they're doing a great service to the industry. And we appreciate the things Kip said about us tonight, because we try to do the same. But it's always fun to have you on here. You always have great information. And hey, this is your night off. You're supposed to be at home chilling, and you're here. So we do appreciate that as well.
Well, I'm drinking water, as far as you know.
Oh, it's got a little lemon in that twisted tea.
Well, again, this is a huge category. I know you've got a lot of other stuff you want to talk about. If you want to say something real quick, but what I want to say is you're always welcome back. Anytime you have anything else that you can talk about, that's not Wink, we'll have back and we'll talk more about it, anything like that. But is there anything else you wanted to say here before we sign out?
Yeah, real quick. First off, I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm on here. Let me put this into 2 different columns for you. I'm on here as Kip Litsey, the enthusiast, and there's nothing cooler than being on with you guys on your show. So that's part 1. That's cool. The second part is I'm on here as a representative for Kicker, and I want to talk about our products and our testing and what we do, and it all kind of started with that test you saw, and I want to talk about that. But the thing I want to kind of just focus on before you sign me out, and I saw it in the comment feed, is someone kind of jokingly said, this sounds like an infomercial for Kicker amps. I'm just talking about how we design our amplifiers, and I'm confident that we make great amplifiers. They have a legendary history of being reliable, sounding good. What we say they do. And so I am proud of what we make. But I'll also go on the record, all those names that Derek talked about when he's talking about, if you're looking at this amp compared to this amp, he brought up JL, he brought up Rockford, he brought up Audio Control. I can't remember all of you brought up, Derek, but you brought up some names there. You know what? Those guys also have an outstanding reputation, and they make some fantastic amplifiers. I'm proud to be one of the companies that's out there that also makes some fantastic amplifiers, and I consider myself to be very blessed as our company to be in the same group as those people who are making honest rated amplifiers. They're built solid. They have great signal noise ratio. They're making good products too. So I don't want anyone to think that this was a Kicker infomercial. Am I proud of what we make? And was the kind of the topic talking about our testing standards tonight? It sure was, but I want you to realize that whatever you like, whatever you buy, make sure you're getting your dollar's worth, and sometimes the least expensive product is not the value. Just keep that in mind.
Perfect way to end it. Rob, you have any last words of wisdom?
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Kip. You're not just a Kicker guy to us. You're like our personal friend. So it's a little bit different than just having kicker on. But besides that, tomorrow, reverse polarity, me and Dean, always fun. But after that, we're doing side jag. We watched Tenet this weekend. We're going to review that. That was a – but you also are going to get to meet my son. My son is going to be the special guest on Thursday night, side jag, 8:45 Central Standard Time.
Fun.
Check it out. Should be fun.
We'll be
Cool. All right. Sounds good. Well, Kip, we look forward to hanging out with you again next Tuesday. Kicker Unmasked Live. Make sure you subscribe to Kicker YouTube channel because they don't have near enough subscribers. You guys should be hitting them up and getting the notifications. And we're not paid to say this. We're just really enthusiasts of the industry, and we're enthusiasts of companies like Kicker who are really out here doing stuff good for everybody. It's not just for them. It does benefit them, but they're true enthusiasts across the board. So we do appreciate you guys. Ernie, thanks for hanging in there tonight and helping out Kip.
Yeah, Bill.
Switching the computer. We appreciate you. All right. Y'all have a good evening.
Before we
Thanks,
log
everybody.
out, Redman, it's live. Check it out. Go to my
There you
store
go.
on the YouTube page, on Hava Vega YouTube page.
Yeah,
You'll see
Rob
it.
redid all of his merch. So if you go to his YouTube channel, you can link over, and he's got a T-shirt that says "Wire it to the dirt," or "Wire it in the dirt," or is it "Wire it to
Wire
the dirt"?
to the dirt. Yeah,
To the dirt.
right.
All right,
It's
Peace
called
out.
it's called letting it kip.
letting it kip. Take a dip. Don't trip.
Had a great time, guys.
See y'all
Thanks.
next week. Thanks again, Kip.
See ya.
Yes,
See ya.
sir. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye.